Welcome to Police Canine Radio. I'm Gregg Tawney. With me, Rich Hartman. Rich, what's going on?
We're going to cover a controversial video that just popped up this week. It's been kind of everywhere.
Controversial music.
Controversial.
No?
Okay. We'll tell you. Anyway, it's just,
we got a new soundboard we're gonna play with. So much to
it's probably a bad idea, but you know it'll be fun.
It'll be fun for us, you and me. Nobody else is gonna like it.
Wah, wah, wah. Anyway, this video has been all over the place. It's on the LEO page, which is where we picked it up, the LEO Canine discussion page, and there's a lot of comments covering this video. I'll just kind of give you a rundown and then we'll watch the video. Is what we know is that it was a San Diego Police Department deployment with their canine. We see a female standing out in the street. She's clearly done something wrong and it looks like the cops want to arrest her. She's holding some kind of metal tool, pole stick in her hand. At some point the dog is sent to apprehend her and doesn't. Looks like the dog maybe shows a little nerves, not maybe, definitely shows some nerves at that point and does not engage with the female. After a couple tries, they end up going hands-on and taking her into custody. Looked like everything went fine after that point. So then the discussion on the LEO page from everybody that chimed in, it went from the dog should never be on the street, poor selection, worst thing in the world, all the way to maybe it's a nice dog and just hasn't seen this picture, could be young. So we're going to try and kind of cover all sides of that. And I think there's times where we can agree with both of those. If we saw that dog and it was in our group and we knew more about the dog, we could say, yep, terrible, terrible dog. We're going to send it back. This isn't the dog for the job. Or we could say, no, this dog is really amazing. 90% of the time it saw this picture, never seen it before. We just need to show it that picture again. So we're going to go down the path of having a decent debate on what should happen with this dog and show you what happened. So why don't we show the video quick so everybody can see what we're talking about, and then we'll talk about what happened.
Yeah, and if you're a law enforcement officer and you're not on the Facebook LEO page, you need to get on there. There's a lot of good topics, a lot of good discussion. It's really worthwhile. So, and then some good comments, some not so good. What you get with all social media, but definitely worth watching, worth looking at. So, without delay, we're going to go play the video right now. Here's the video. And if you guys are listening to this on the podcast, you've already seen the video. Probably no need to go to the YouTube channel, but we have our YouTube channel up. If you are listening to the podcast, you want to see the video, go to Police Canine Radio YouTube, and you'll see the video.
Everything's comprised of my life. I'm going to ruin everything. Literally everything. And you're not going to stop me, because if you do, I'll crack your skulls, I'll ruin your eyes, I'll ruin your whole life. Boss!
Okay, there you have it.
That could have gone better.
Yeah, I mean, it's every handler's worst nightmare, right? Like we've talked about it. Like when you get a dog, my nightmare was the dog just running alongside the suspect and not engaging. But yeah, it's one of those things where we train so hard. We try to do everything right. We try to do the proper selection. We've had this dog, we put so many hours and so much time into it. And then when the time comes, there's a lack of performance for whatever reason. We're going to talk about, possible reasons for it. But I always go back to saying, hey, and I tell this at the basic handler class, my biggest highs and my biggest lows have been behind a leash, and if you do this job long enough, you're going to have a lot of things occur that you wish didn't, and it's a learning lesson for everybody. But it's when everything goes right, it's like heroin. It's like, it's the best feeling in the world. And then when things go wrong, it's like, God dang it, sleepless nights going over it in my mind of what I should have done different, what I could have done different, what I missed. So I really feel for the handler in this situation. And then, of course, right, with the day and the age in which we live in, like, my mistakes are gone. Like, there is no record of that mistake ever being made, right? And I made a lot of them through a 16-year career of handling dogs. But, whenever anything goes wrong now, like, you're under this microscope, and now it's boom, 1 million views, 2 million views, 3 million views, and it just goes out. And but trust me, just if that handler is listening, just wait 5 minutes. Something else is going to pop up, and everybody moves on. That's the good side of all this stuff, is it comes and goes really quickly.
Yeah, I think Taylor Swift will go to a football game next week, and we won't even know anything about this, right? Like, it'll all be gone. Let's talk about what we do know. San Diego Canine has over 30 dogs on their unit, and we know their trainer Zach.
Big unit.
Zach is a very progressive, competent,
good trainer.
Definitely would trust him with our dogs. We've talked to him several times. Nothing hugely different than how we're training dogs. A lot of the same situations.
Yes.
This I also know without talking to Zach or talking to anybody at San Diego PD. When you have over 30 dogs on the street, same if you have 30 cops on the street, same if you have 30 employees at Baskin-Robbins, something's going to go wrong at some point with that many dogs. It's not always going to be perfect. There's probably a dog there that's really hot, doesn't like to out. There's probably a dog that's on the lower end of its aggression and its intensity, and then there's a whole bunch of dogs that fill in the blanks in between that. And so we're not talking like we're coming from some place of higher standing. I currently, right now, we have dogs that we've raised and trained. I have over 40 dogs on the street right now. I just got a dog back, and it was a dog that was not doing its job well enough. It had some failures on the street, and they determined the department determined that dog wasn't strong enough for their program. I got that dog back. That was a dog that I trained. That was a dog that I put on the street, and it failed, and I got that dog back, and they got their money back. So even in our own program, we're not immune to having dogs that don't do what we thought they were going to do. And I'm dealing with that right now.
Yeah, well, I like to go back to an interview I did with Michael Ellis, and he said when he first started out in dog training, he was full of absolutes. Like, he's like, I got this. And the more dogs he trained, the more dogs he touched, the more he realized that it's not that simple, right? And there's these dogs that don't fit within this paradigm that you feel like you've constructed as far as your dog training. So something to think about. When we select our dogs, we try to run them through the paces. We like to watch them hunt. We like to watch the body posture, right? We like to watch engagement. We want to see if they have a civil side or how much prey they have, and try to set up a bunch of different little scenarios, put pressure on them, have them come into the bite, put them into the corner. Prior to the bite, try to put a little bit of pressure on them, and you make sure they're environmentally stable. And for those of you that are listening that haven't trained a lot of dogs, or maybe not even in law enforcement, just remember, like, the dog we're trying to select is a dog that's cooperative with the handler. He's not biting the handler. He's not biting cover officers, but you need him to bite that guy over there, but don't bite anybody else on the way. I want him, and this is the list that Rich gets constantly. I want him to be social. We've got kids in the house. I want him to get along. I'd like him to be good with other dogs. I want him to do demos, and then not bite the handler, but then go up in the attic and then engage a suspect that doesn't want to go back to jail and almost fight to the end. Like, what we're looking for, there's such a small number of dogs that will fit that. And a lot of times we don't know what we're getting. And let's just jump right into it. We're selecting nowadays, we're getting 14, 15, 16-month-old dogs. Newsflash, dogs don't fully mature till they're 3 years old. So there is an unknown quantity of maturity. And the dog that Rich is talking about, he was a young shepherd, and we're like, he's going to mature with time. Usually through the basic handler class, we see these dogs really grow. So some of these dogs that come out and that grow throughout the handler class turn out to be the best balanced, versus we've had dogs at 13 months old that went out on the street and had no issues with the first engagement, second engagement, third engagement. By the time they're 3, they are a handful. And now the engagement sometimes turns towards the handler and is redirected aggression towards anybody once the dog hits a higher level of drive. So, it's a double-edged sword. So you get these young dogs that are really hot, and sometimes they become too much. We've had a lot of success with dogs that are just kind of moderate at that age, and then they grow and they become what we call that unicorn that's going out, they're doing demos, they fit great within a family, and they're engaging on the street. So, when we're looking at the selection end, it's not cut and dry. And in the industry, we've probably done ourselves a disservice with that, right? Because it used to be we would get dogs at 3 years old. Now, if we have a dog that's 3 years old, the agency's like, what's wrong with that dog? Why do you still have that dog? Why isn't he working with an agency? I want a dog that's 15 months old, and I'll get much more life out of that dog. It's also a much more forgiving dog for a new handler. If you're, I don't want to say unfair, but the dog is much more tolerant of a new handler versus a 3-year-old dog or a KMPV dog. That was the other issue. Again, these KMPV dogs are strong. Put them with the new handler. Handler does not deliver anywhere near a correction they were getting in the Netherlands. And next thing you know, the dog's running the show. And we have another problem on that end. So, it's this constant trying to find the perfect balance. And let me tell you, it's not easy. I feel like we've done a really good job over the years. We're probably less than a 5% failure rate with all the dogs that we've had come through. But we're not perfect. Any vendor out there that says they're perfect, or any trainer that says they're perfect, tell them keep training dogs, because then they just haven't trained enough dogs, because trust me, it's not a perfect program.
Yeah, and this dog that we're getting back, that doesn't even take into account the amount of dogs that we washed prior to even showing them, right? Like, bring dogs in, everything looks hopeful on the video, or everything sounds hopeful with the vendor or the breeder that we're getting dogs from. And then they show up and we're like, hey man, this dog is clearly a pet. And we don't even, you never see him, a handler never sees him, an agency never sees him, but they were promising to us, they look like everything was going to go great, and then we bring them in, and something causes them to fail out before we even get them into the program. So, like you said, it's just a matter of time. If you're throwing dogs out there, if you're working with dogs, if you're training dogs, and it could be hunting dogs, it could be detection dogs, it could be apprehension dogs, whatever it is, something's going to fall through the cracks, and you're going to have a dog that doesn't meet your standards. That should be a normal part of doing this.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. So we're heavy on the dog end right now, but the dog is actually just a small piece of this entire pie that we're talking about, right? So certainly you could have selected maybe the wrong dog. That's possible. It happens. But that's not the only piece to this puzzle, because we've had dogs that were not successful with one handler, only to go to another handler and do great, right? Like soar, like all of a sudden engagement's not an issue. I've personally, with my old agency, we worked a dog that was a return from another agency. They had 3 failures on the street. We paired him with an excellent handler that took his time. We took a lot of pressure off the dog, did a lot of positive reinforcement. Remember, a dog can feel pressure from 2 points. They can feel pressure from the handler. So if you have a heavy-handed handler, it can shut a dog down. And so they feel pressure from the handler and from the suspect. And so, the selection, there's also a matching with the handler, and that is difficult. And I'll tell you, one of the frustrations that Rich has and that I have is we don't get to select the handlers. They're like, here's your handler. And you're like, holy cow. This person has terrible timing. This person has a personality that is going to be really hard to fit with a dog, right? Maybe a little softer personality. And so how much dog are we going to be able to give this person? Are they going to help build the dog, or is their timing going to be so poor and their corrections either not enough at times or too hard other times? And that will affect a good dog. So we're not just talking about the selection and the dog end of it. Let's talk about the handling end of it.
Yeah, that's a big deal for us. You and I talk about it all the time. It's always nice when we have 4 or 5 dogs in the wings waiting, and then we have 2 or 3 handlers, and we're like, hey, I think that guy would be great with that dog, and I think she would fit well with that dog. But we don't always have that. No, I don't know if anybody has that, right? So sometimes, like you said, handler shows up, we have a dog available, agency says pair them together, and we kind of cross our fingers and hope for the most. And we see it a lot with timing. I think timing is our biggest issue, where a dog hits the end of the leash, takes it as a correction. A dog gets affection or gets a toy when it's doing the wrong thing, and the dog starts to kind of get confused as to what the proper path was. Most of these dogs, especially years gone by, were coming from other trainers, whether it was KMPV, Schutzen, home sport type thing. So they were being handled correctly for a fair amount of their life. The timing was always right. Everything was good. And then they get put in there with a handler, a new handler who doesn't have the best timing. And it might take a leash pop as a correction. Send them out to hunt, hits the end of the 30-foot leash, pops them pretty good on the harness. And the dog's like, whoa, fuck, man, what did I do wrong? I'm sorry. And then they do that a couple times. And the dog's like, hey, I'm not going to go out there and do that anymore. Just because the timing was poor, not really due to anybody's fault other than, new handlers are new handlers and they screw up. But then if you have a sensitive dog, and now like you're talking about, we're starting dogs on the street at 13 months, 14 months, 15 months. That's all developmental time. That's the time where we never saw dogs. When you and I were doing this, we didn't see dogs at 13 months, 14 months, 15 months, unless somebody was raising them locally. We were getting dogs that were 2 and 3 years old that were proven on the sport field. And then we were getting them and kind of unpackaging some of their problems, but they were developed. We knew what we had, and the dogs were typically strong enough to work through any poor handling. Now, the handler has to be a trainer. The handler is a trainer. It's just a matter of whether they're a good trainer or a bad trainer.
Hey, we also picked up another sponsor, Modern Icon. And again, this was not a mistake. Like all of our sponsors, we actually use their products. And we seek them out and went, hey, we really like your product. We have handlers that are using your products. We'd love for you to be a sponsor on the show because we only advertise things we believe in. So if we're talking about it, you can be assured that we're using it and we believe in it. So Modern Icon, they provide heavy-duty tactical canine collars, leads, and harnesses for police, military, and outdoor enthusiasts. They are made by law enforcement. So the story actually began in Lee's basement, where he realized that there was some deficiencies in some of the products and said, I can overbuild this. And that's exactly what they did. They overbuilt it so it will last the life of your dog. And it's made right here in USA. And if you use the discount code RADIO, RADIO, you are going to get a 10% discount. And it is one of the best harnesses, I think, in the industry. Definitely worth the money. You do not want to have cheap equipment out there. You don't want to have stuff that's not performing like it should or inhibiting the dog's ability to track or to search. And these things are built with quality in mind, and they work great.
I have 4 Modern Icon harnesses hanging up in my van right now. It is the harness that we use. It's the harness that we train police dogs on. I absolutely love Modern Icon, and I know, I think Jason over at Elk Grove started using one. Now I think their whole agency is using the Modern Icon. We're seeing it a lot, but that reminds me, you're talking about Modern Icon.
What?
And we also have Ray Allen as a sponsor.
Yes.
Any conflict there?
So this is what's funny. So after speaking with Modern Icon, I reached out to Ray Allen, Matt Wilson over there. We've had him on the podcast. And I said, hey, is this a conflict of interest for you? And his first response was, how dare you, in capital letters. And then followed shortly by, no, those are good people over there. And this is what I'm talking about Ray Allen and their philosophy within the industry. Like, they are all about putting out good equipment, and their whole drive is that handlers are out there and they're successful and they're only working with the best stuff. And because Ray Allen's harness is awesome as well. I mean, we have handlers that have their harness as well, and those are the 2 we're recommending. And really the only 2 that we recommend is the Ray Allen and the Modern Icon. You really can't go wrong with each. It's just a matter of preference. Ray Allen's been around for years. I mean, when I first started in this business, in the 80s, we were buying Ray Allen stuff. And what I love about Ray Allen is they've continued to update their equipment. And now we have a bunch of products. We have a bunch of sleeves from them. We have lines. We have guys that are running their harnesses as well. You can't go wrong with Ray Allen. And it's, guys, buy from a business that has your best interest in mind. Like, they're not out there just if they were out there just for the dollar, they would have said, hold up, time out, we're paying you for advertising. No, that was exactly the opposite. And throughout our interview with him, we got the feeling from Matt that, like, hey, man, this guy's in it for the right reason. So that's cool. Support those kind of companies. Either one, they're great companies. Ray Allen, Modern Icon, Inukshuk, these are all things that we use, we love, and we're glad to be partnered with.
Absolutely. And just quick funny story, the last conversation that we had with Modern Icon was at their booth at Hold the Line, and who was there standing with us also talking to Modern Icon? Matt Wilson. So it was
It's
a
a
good
family.
group. Yeah, it's people that out there that care about how the dogs are able to succeed. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be part of that group and support their equipment, because we've had issues in the past with equipment that was causing dogs some harm, and now we have definite trusted suppliers that are only making the dogs better.
100%. We have the dog end of it, right? And we're talking about the variables involved in that, especially depending on the age of that dog. We're bringing in a handler that selected for various reasons. Hey, nobody else wanted it, all the way to, like, he's really proactive. He writes a lot of tickets. Really has nothing to do with dog training. And I've even heard agencies come forward and go, well, we think that this handler would be good if they learn some better tactics, and we know you guys work tactics. It's like, you don't add a dog to the mix and think their tactics are going to get better. It's usually the opposite, quite a bit. So we have the handler end of it. So then we start looking at exposure training, right? And I think that was some of the comments that came up on the board. Well, the dog hasn't seen, certain pictures, and I can assure you, and I know San Diego PD, like, they do everything we do. Like, it's like, hey, we're going to show the dog a prosthetic. We're going to show the dog a hidden sleeve. We try to work on targeting. Let's give them bicep bites. Let's give them leg bites. Let's do all these things. Let's do civil agitation. We do muzzle engagements. So we really try to show a lot of different. Let's go passive. Let's go somebody that's being actively resisting. All those types of things. But at the end of the day, you cannot recreate an actual bite on the street. And there's certain factors that are really difficult to recreate. And so, like, number one is the stress that the handler's feeling. And we see this. Old time saying, it goes down the line, right? So the handler's in training, and I was guilty of this my first deployment on the street. I was like, Stellen, right? That was my bite command. And then my first deployment, Steller, Steller, Steller. I was screaming my head off. I was jacked up. Later on, I was like, what the hell? That was nothing like training. Luckily, my dog persevered, pushed through despite of me. And we see this a lot with new handlers, and we go over it, and we try to do this stress exposure training. So we try to really mitigate that. But when time comes and rubber meets the road, we sometimes get jacked up. And the dog, when they hear your voice, they hear that stress, it goes down the line. Even if they're offline, they feel that energy. That can affect them, right? The suspect is moving differently. They smell differently. There's an enhanced odor to it. In the video, to me, it looks like she's probably drunk or under the influence or something. So that has its own element to it.
And she's a she.
And she's a she. How many of you guys are out there training your dogs with female decoys?
We see that struggle a lot, and especially, if you have a male handler and there's females at home, wife, kids, any of those things, and they have a positive relationship with a female at home, female might be the one feeding the dog, moving the dog around, doing those kind of things, or at least never has any negative interaction, with a wife, something like that. And now, first time the dog sees a female as a suspect, maybe there's some confusion. I mean, there definitely was some confusion, but we don't know what caused it.
Yeah, we have had this specific situation with a dog that probably had 5 or 6 street engagements, and the handler sends the dog underneath a porch, and it was a female, and she just sweet talked, "Hey, baby," and the dog comes up, and again, there's no prey attraction, right? Like, if you guys are going to run a female decoy, really try to do it in a civil or in muzzle or something. Take that prey attraction out, because the dog comes in, they see that you can run them in a suit and a sleeve. It helps, but like a hidden sleeve or a muzzle would be better, because the dog sees the suit, and a lot of times they don't even recognize who's wearing it, but this gal freaking got, "Hey, baby," and then the dog came out, and he had to redeploy, and the dog worked through it. And this was a pretty higher end police dog, but even that dog struggled when you added the female component. And Rich, I mean, we've had it where you've had Kylie raised dogs and things like that in your kennel, and like you said, all good shit comes from them. Like, all the food comes from them. Like, all the praise comes from them. Like I said, the wife, it's a different relationship. And now it's they get a calm female that might be talking calmly on the street, and that's something a little more a different picture for the dog.
Yeah, you put together a list before we came on the air of all the things in that given scenario that might affect the dog. You want to run down that list, between environmental, gender, all those things, and just so we can kind of take out. It's not always just the dog; it's the entire picture.
Yeah, so all these ingredients make the pie, so to speak. The engagement pie, we'll call it.
The engagement pie.
I don't know. Sounds good. Yeah. Well, so number one, we got the handler. We just talked about that. The stress they feel, their interaction with the dog, and if it's been a handler that's usually a little harder on the dog, you can see dogs getting a little more submissive. It goes down the line, 100%. You got the suspect's actions. You got the suspect's gender. You got the smell, right? Dogs tell a lot about their environment, about people by their nose, and the handler's already stressed. The suspect is elevated, enhanced odor, might have some other things on board. Their movements are a little bit different. Their actions. We got the environment, right? You have other cover officers coming out and yelling. A lot of times these dogs may have been driving around, especially a new dog. We'll get some agencies that are a little slower, and they've basically been a ride along for about a year and a half. Every time they come out, they just come out to, do a little training, or they come out to, take a break, and all of a sudden they're sleeping in the back of the car. They're grabbed up, and let's go. Time to go 10-8. Handlers, if you... the thing you can do on that end is do some surprise stuff with your dog on duty. Have your trainer come out, or get another handler, and make sure your dog does not become the ride along for 2 years until the time you need them, and you pop that door and you want them to jump right into action. That can sometimes be a little bit problematic. We talked about the dog and the dog selection. When we select dogs, I really like to see the body posture in the hunt. That'll tell you a lot about engagement. Obviously we want to run them through the normal tests. What's their prey drive like? How's their, once we put them on a bite, we can push them into a corner. Are they civil? And here's the thing, every dog, they don't bite for the same reasons. We've had dogs that are super high in prey, and everything is a rabbit to them. You can show them the bear, but all they see is rabbit. And they work fine on the street. And then we have other dogs that they see more bear, so they're more civil, and it's more fight-oriented. And so if you want to break it down and try to stereotype into breeds, like your Malinois is your more prey-driven. It runs, I bite it. And then your Shepherd, and again, this isn't 100%, your Shepherd is a little bit more balanced with a lot of times a little less prey, but it's much more personal to them. So every dog's got a different degree of that, and you can work both dogs on the street. So it's we look for a proper balance in that area. So, is he environmental? But then again, is he cooperative with the handler? Because we have issues, right, where it's like, hey, this dog will bite on the street 100%, but he might bite the handler 3 times en route to the call. You know what I mean? So that's problematic as well. So it's all about finding the right balanced dog. And that's tough, man. That's where, we talk about, like, this is an art. not a science. And so a lot of it just comes down to working the dog and feeling the dog and watching him and kind of just based upon past experiences of putting it together if this dog's going to engage or not.
Can you talk about some things that you would do to make that dog in that situation a little more successful? I think we saw a couple things that were like, maybe if the handler was able to, do this or that, the dog might have a better experience in that. And then if you were keeping the dog, which from what I've read, and again, we don't have any firsthand information on this. From what I've read, the dog has had successful apprehensions in the past on the street, and is capable in training, and this is a bit of a standalone issue, in spite of what everybody seems to think about the dog needs to be washed out right away. Say you're keeping the dog and you want to work on the dog. Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. Say we're keeping the dog and we want to work on it. What kind of things, one, what would you have done on that scene to make it more successful? And then what would you do moving forward training wise to see if we can kind of bridge this gap between success and failure?
Yeah, so what we always talk about with new handlers is back pressure, back pressure, back pressure. And, grabbing the dog by the harness and pulling them back will then create an opposition reflex in which they then dive deeper into the harness, and it gives them the confidence. And I think it clears it up, especially when our stress is way up and we're now yelling the command. Remember, dogs, they go based upon your body posture and your tone much more than the actual words you're saying. We've seen this play out where handlers give the wrong command, but the dog does it because the inflection and the tone and everything and the body posture is more of the equation than the actual word used. So by grabbing them up and getting that back pressure, that a lot of times will mitigate maybe the stress that's going down the line to the dog, and it kind of communicates to the dog that, okay, it's okay to push forward. So I think a little back pressure here may have helped. And one thing I want to add to this is at the end, the handler does grab him by the harness and tries to give him back pressure and get him into it a little bit. Like we always say, like if a dog does have difficulty on their first few engagements, it can make all the difference in the world by grabbing them and making it a positive. We've had, the dog's offline and is questioning a passive, and then the handler pulls back on the line, and then the dog just, boom, dives in and engages. So the back pressure on the front end is really going to be important. So that's one thing that I would do. We talked about female decoys. We talked about, a lot of these things I like to resolve in a muzzle, because once you put anybody in a suit out there, and I know like a lot of guys want to talk about, well, I need to see a bicep bite. Yeah, I mean, do we want to show the different pictures? Yes. Do we do bicep bites with all our dogs? Absolutely. But I don't know if that was as much of a targeting issue, because there were times where if you saw she like dropped and turned and kind of even gave kind of a side profile. And we've had dogs back in the day, man, they just did sleeve bites and then all their bites were on the leg. So at the end of the day, a dog that's going to bite a human, there's a lot of dogs you don't need to show any different pictures. Not saying that I recommend that, but if they're going to bite a human, they'll bite a human. You don't have to show them, well, I'm going to show them the left leg, I'm going to show the front left leg, I'm going to show the front right leg, I'm going to show the front or back left leg, back of the arm, front of the arm, like you really, we do it, right? Just because of better safe than sorry. But you could see the dog right there was really confused. I think a little bit of back pressure. I don't know if on scene right there, that dog was going to pull through, just because you could see them throw her to the ground at the end. And we'll a lot of times see that elicit a dog like, oh, I got this. Now I know what we're doing. I kind of realize that, now we're kind of almost like the pack mentality, right? So it's like, but the dog was kind of mentally disengaged at that point. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors here. I don't know how old the dog is. I don't know. You mentioned the dog probably had some other street bites. I don't know what those pictures look like. But I think I would definitely try to recreate it. I would try to do a lot of muzzle. And then I would do hidden sleeve, showing the same picture, right? Like this, like this, like this. And at the last second, maybe give a hidden sleeve bite. You can also put clothing over the suit, right? So maybe try to get a low profile suit and try to show a very similar picture while also working inside bites. I want to do everything I can at this point. Like, I don't want to look at the dog and go, okay, we're done. I want to reevaluate in training, and I want to try to recreate the situation the best I can.
Hey, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Inukshuk. We have had several rescue dogs that have come into our facility lately. Shepherds, pit bulls, all that from different rescues and shelters all around California. And a lot of those dogs are struggling. We just had a shepherd come in the other day who was a rescue. Kind of a sad story, really a sad story. He's been living in a box for the last 2 years. The breeder developed, he had a stroke and developed some brain issues and kind of lost his cognitive ability to take care of the dogs. And by the time animal control got there, the situation had gotten way out of control. So this dog came in, been living in a box for 2 years, gravely underweight, malnourished. We immediately switched that dog over to Marine, Inukshuk, and within a month, the dog looks like a completely different dog. Hair's glossy, weight back, can't see any ribs. Just a complete transformation. And we are also getting a lot of dogs from shelters where the dogs come in and we are being told that they have some type of allergy. And the reality is they just aren't eating good food. We switch them over to Inukshuk, and a lot of the Inukshuk formulas have chicken in them, which is supposedly what the allergy is too, and the dogs are thriving on it. So really, really good food. We know it's been tried and true for the dogs that we have from the police world, definitely the sport dogs, a lot of our pet dogs, but now to be able to supply this for dogs that are coming from rescues and show some malnourishment, this has been a really good pick-me-up for those dogs, and we're seeing a lot more health issues being erased because of Inukshuk. So shout out to Inukshuk, always developing a good food for us. We're using it across the board, pets, police, and now rescue dogs. Just good stuff and making the dogs thrive. Are you comfortable saying that there are plenty of dogs that you've worked with that have had early failures that ended up being completely capable and very desirable police canines down the line?
And here's the funny thing is some of the dogs that have a little struggle on the front end turn out to be our best balanced dog. Like I said, the dog that comes out and he's 15 months old and he's nuking people right out of the gate, I really do get concerned at 3 years old what that dog's going to be all about. And we've seen it, right? We've had some dogs that come out and they got their first street bite at 15 months old. And then at 3 years old, we're dealing with aggression issues with the handler, or they're going in drive on everybody. The sociability is limited. Like now the dog is like, from the car to the kennel, from the kennel to the car, which is fine. But once it starts turning inward towards the handler or boils over and you can't trust him around cover, like he searches for a little bit and he's like, that's it. I'm going to just take you, the guy next to you. I'm tired of looking, out here looking for the suspect. They can become quite a handful. So yeah, I for sure see. And we talk about it, right, Rich? Like, it's like, hey, if they struggle just a little bit on the first one, that's fine. And we've seen some dogs that turn out to be just, I'm talking dogs with 30, 40 street bites at the end, engage on a bunch of different pictures, but then yet goes and does a demo with us at the school. Like, we're talking about the total dog at the end of the day. And this is what agencies want, so we're trying to provide that.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it in the beginning. One thing to keep in mind, and this is across the industry because I think it's happening everywhere, at least in the U.S., is the age has dropped so low to the, that we're selling dogs and that dogs are hitting the street. Like you said, if we're not seeing full maturity until 2.5, 3 years old, and we're working 17, 16, 15-month-old dogs on the street, like, you really have to be a developer. You have to have the ability as a handler to be a trainer, to bring things up, to hopefully set up the dog for success, which we don't always have the ability to do. We can't dictate how the call's going to look when it comes out, right? We show up, like, this handler in San Diego had no ability to make her do what the dog needed to see, right? Like it was all up to the suspect how this was going to unravel. We didn't even talk about nighttime. I don't know when San Diego trains. I assume that they have enough freedom that they can train during the day and during the night, but that was a nighttime call. There were a lot of, your overheads were still going. There was a lot of shadowing. Who knows what that dog has seen and what it hasn't seen, but when you're throwing a teenager, it would almost be like taking an explorer or a cadet out of a program for a day and say, hey, we're short on cops. I need you to, go run this beat as a 15-year-old kid. Maybe we have some 15-year-old kids that are capable of kind of checking the boxes and doing it right, but there's a really good chance you're going to have some street failures from a 15-year-old, cadet or explorer doing police work. The same thing applies to these young police dogs. And it's a very imperfect situation right now that we're dealing with. And I'm on the selling end of that, where I'm putting 14, 15, 16-month-old dogs on the street. And I'm like, man, like they're still developing. Do me a favor and help them get to the right point. And then sometimes you just can't, because sometimes the scenario unfolds in a way that the dog's just not prepared to handle it. And so the answer would be hold on to the dog until it's 3 years old. Financially, I can't do that, right? I'm not holding on to a dog for 3 years. And we don't have a sport out here that I want to hang out. When Adler Horse would go overseas and get a dog, they were usually pulling them from the sport field, and people were living with those dogs, and you could go to this club and that club, and you could procure all these nice dogs that have been proven on the field. We don't have that anymore. So it's a different world.
Yeah, they're more the exception than the rule. Yeah. And for those of you that are like, that dog just needs to be pulled right away. Okay, there's more things to consider than just pulling the dog. Number one, let's pull the dog and reevaluate. For sure, right? Like, it wouldn't be like, okay, we'll just go out and we'll address this in training in 2 weeks. No, we would prioritize it, and then like think about, you talk about time invested, money invested, not only just like the time on the training end, but like the handler's end, like an agency that invests in when it's time to get a new dog, you have a handler that's out of service, usually in a basic handler class, anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to 12 weeks. You're getting a whole nother dog. So then you got the investment on that end. The time is also a factor when we're talking about like agencies don't want a handler out of service for 6 months. I know there's a few really large agencies that do it that way, which is awesome. Our agencies, 6 weeks is what we got with them, right? So there's not, all the ingredients and the demands that go into finding that perfect dog, making sure the handler's ready for the street, making sure the dog is ready for the street, and that's why we take it so seriously at training and during our basic handler classes. Like we get out there, we try to reduce downtime as much as we can. And we try to, really just, they're long days for us. But it's just so important. Right. Like, and it's like, I get it. Like you see one video and you want to come to a conclusion, and you could tell by this podcast, it ain't that simple. There's a lot of different variables that could contribute to a dog having issues on an engagement. So I would suggest some of the people on the threads to have a little patience with that. Step off of the high horse a little bit and just thinking, if you've trained a couple dogs, that you have the solution. It's not that simple. There's much more involved, and there's much more involved than just hey, well, we'll just swash that dog and get another dog. Okay, well, there's a lot of variables there of the agency and the investment and the time. And in a perfect world, we would just have another dog on deck and just swap them out, right? But it's an imperfect world, and so the model's imperfect. So, and Rich, we talk about it all the time. I struggle with that. With have we done this to ourselves? In a lot of ways. Are we not charging enough for dogs, and should we be pushing for longer and longer handler courses and getting older and older dogs? Because have we gone down that path, and have we competed with other trainers and other vendors, and we've kind of pigeonholed ourselves because these agencies are like, well, this is our budget and this is what I want, and we have success, right? The majority of dogs we get out there, vast majority do well, and so do the handlers. So I don't know. That's a topic for probably another podcast. We'll get somebody in here that's pretty passionate about it. There's a few on the board down there that we could probably get that we could talk about that would be lively conversation, right?
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that, the most, I guess, egregious comments that I saw on the LEO page, and some of them came from some pretty salty characters, is that whoever selected the dog fucked up in the beginning. And I just don't think that's true. I don't think it's as clear as that. And I think a dog can show a lot of really promising things in a selection process. And then later on, we see something we're like, I wish it was better there. We do all the same stuff. We do environmental, we do grips, we do, compatibility, we do hunt, we do all those same things. But a lot of times when we're testing a dog, we take it to one building. All right, let's check the environmental here. We take it and do a lot of the, if we do a stakeout, we do it on a field. Everything's still a little controlled. It's not every building. If I take it to a tire shop to test it on test day, doesn't mean I've tested in Costco. It doesn't mean I've tested it at the local fair. You see these dogs that are working at Disneyland. The environments are different when you're testing environmentals, right? Like you can test it in one place and everything can go great there. And then it's nighttime in the same place and it's immediately different. It's a rainy day and a sprinkler's broken at some place. Now the ground's wet. That's a whole different situation. Lights are on. Everything makes it different. So just to be like, hey, you fucked up in the beginning on selection is pretty short-sighted. I think that there's, and the fact that we know that this dog sounds like it's had some success before. And maybe it's like you said, maybe it's a young dog and it loves prey. Like it thinks prey is amazing. She didn't show a lot of prey. So maybe the dog's like, I'm not built for that yet. It's just, I don't know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater right away because there's a failure and you say, that dog sucks, send it back. And whoever picked incorrectly. And, I think that's just wrong. I think it's wrong because we see, I have dogs on the street right now that are very successful that had failures on their first or second deployment. And they're dogs that we raised, and the handlers are very happy with the dogs right now. They're balanced, like you said. They almost end up being a little unicornish because it took them a while to get there, but when they got there, they were a little more thoughtful, a little more intelligent about what they were doing. We also have dogs on the street that got their first apprehension at 13 months old. And like you said, those dogs now as 2, 3, and 4-year-olds are a handful because they started off so hot. So it's an imperfect world. It's an imperfect situation. And everybody who thinks that they have the answer from watching a 45-second clip, there before the grace of God go they, right? Like I hope that all their dogs are perfect.
Yeah, well, everybody wants to reduce it to something simple, and they go based upon their own experiences. And like that dog, you didn't do a tie out. And let me tell you about the tie out. So just because you brought it up real quick, the dog is defending himself on a tie out. That's much different than going out and being combative and picking the fight. So, if you, for those trainers that are like, well, I just do a tie out and then I do a bite on the sleeve. Well, like, do you know if the dog is actually combative and wants to go pick up a fight? And we've seen the dogs that they will stand their ground all day long and defend their ground around them and themselves. But I don't need to go pick a fight with that guy in the corner, right? So there's a lot of little components here, and I think you hit it on the head, Rich. Like there's a lot of variables. I think the dog obviously needs to go back into training, readdress it, try to show the picture a number of different ways, reassess the dog. And if at the end of the day you go, yeah, there's a hole in this dog, we didn't see it, we see it now, maybe they do pull him, right? Yes. So maybe we go, hey, we're just going to put this guy in a detection mode, or we're going to find some other home for him, and we'll start from scratch. But you just don't go right to we're scrapping him based upon that one deployment.
I think that's solid advice, and hopefully everybody that's out there can, take something from this and apply it to their own. Because again, like you said, if you're in charge of a unit or you're training and you haven't dealt with failures and how to kind of get past them, or how to pull the plug and say, hey, we're done, we've tried everything, it's only a matter of time before you start dealing with them. So if you're living in that world where you're only around dogs that have never failed, awesome. That's temporary at best.
Yeah, keep training. You'll have yours. And I don't even like to use the term failure a lot of times. It's I look at it as a training opportunity for a lot of new dogs, especially. by grabbing them up, putting some back pressure and teasing them up and letting them see the picture and putting them up. And generally, they are much stronger on the next deployment. And so for you handlers out there that experience anything like that, like get out of your head, get into the mode of training, try to make this a positive experience. And then after that call, if your dog is a little better than prior to the call, then that's a success, not a failure.
Agreed. I think we've dealt with this quite a bit, and it's good. It's good to have these videos out there. It forces us, even us, the two of us, to like, all right, like what would we do in this situation? It forces us to kind of do a little Monday morning quarterbacking, and it's not to go after the agency, not to go after the handler. It's just kind of to see what we all would do in this situation, and really to help educate everybody out there that hasn't dealt with a failure yet. That these are things that happen in the canine world, and it's normal. It's very normal.
Yep, agreed.
All right. In the meantime,
till next, train hard
and be safe.